So the last thing left is to prepare our scene for rendering. So first thing is adding the lights. So let's go to the tab at the top called Lights and Cameras, and let's click on the environment light. So once you clicked on it, you can see a new node in your network called environment light. And also when you scroll down, you'll be able to see this option called environment map. So let's click on this icon next to it. And then on the left, you will have this shortcut called Houdini Pick HDRI. So this is where we can plug in Houdini HDRIs. They are usually very good quality, and on every computer where Houdini is installed, you will have these 3 HDRIs. You can also use your own HDRI if you want to, so your own environment. So let's use one of those, maybe the second one, hit accept. And now in your viewport, you can see the environment. So we have some environment. It's not rendered though. So when you render, you're not going to be able to see that environment. It's only the light. If you want to see the environment in your render, you need to switch on render light geometry. Okay, so let me just scroll the timeline so that we can see the animation. Okay, so the second thing is to set up the camera. So I'm going to go to where it says no camera and click on new camera. And what it's going to do is set up a camera with exactly the same position as I'm looking at the character now. Okay, so let's click on new camera. And now you can see we're looking through camera view. Also here it says camera 1. So we're looking through the camera. If you want to edit the camera, you need to click on this padlock. Otherwise, let me show you, when I rotate, it's going to keep camera in the same position. See, but I'm rotating, so it kind of exits the camera view. So let me go back to camera, then click on the padlock, and now I can move my camera. Okay, so let's use a static camera for this one. You can also animate your camera using keyframes if you want to. So you can hold down Alt, put a keyframe and translate and rotate, and then move several frames and change the position. So you can do that. But I'm just going to use a still camera for now. Okay, so that's my camera position. Once I'm happy with that, I just click on the padlock again. And now I cannot move the camera, so it will just stay in the same position. So we have the environment light, but this will not be enough for our scene. So usually you want around 3 lights in your scene. So let's add 2 more. So I'll add a spotlight. So if you hold down Control and click on it, it will create a spotlight in default position. And then I can click on the padlock again. I'm looking through the spotlight now, and I can position the spotlight. As an alternative, you can also switch off the padlock and then move the spotlight here in the viewport, so it's up to you. Okay, so the first spotlight, I'm going to name it Spotlight Blue. So usually in the scene, if you want to make it look natural, you want to have 2 colors of light at least. So the first color is blue, the second color is orange. So we have cold and warm color. So let's change this color to a bit more blue, just slightly. And I will also change the exposure because you can see it's quite high, maybe to 5. Okay. And now I want to create another light, so let me just duplicate it. So hold down Alt and drag it down. And the second light is going to be warm light, so for example red. Okay, and now I can move, use the rotation tool or the handle and just move it. And I want to change the color to something, maybe let's use yellow for this one. So I'll make it a bit more yellow. So we'll have a blue light and a yellow light. Okay, so let's go back to our camera and pick one frame where we can see the character, the animated character. And now I'll go to this tab over here called Render View. And this is where I can preview my renders. So let's choose our camera, where it says Rep Camera. Let's choose Camera 1 and save the scene, Control S, and then click on Render. Okay, so I can stop the render now because we can see how it looks more or less. So one more thing we need to add now is the background. So you can see we have a black transparent background, so we want to add something in there. So let's go back to the scene view again, and I'm going to create a grid. And let's rename this grid to background, so BG for background. Let's go inside, and you can see I have a grid. I'll just zoom out. Okay, and now I want to create a poly extrude node. And I want to select the group I want to extrude. So I will take that tool and then select all of these, so all these faces, and then click enter. And I want to extrude them. Maybe even more. Okay, so I just created a room and I want to make it much bigger. So let me actually make the grid a bit bigger. Okay, I'll drop down transform node and also position it a bit better. And let's look through the camera and see if it worked. Okay, yeah, so we have the environment. Great, let's just double check that the lights are inside that box. Okay, so this one is inside, this one is inside, they are not intersecting. Great. And now we can go back to the render view and quickly render it again. Okay, let's stop here. So we have the environment, lights. Now we need to add some shaders. So let's go back to the object level and let's go to the material palette. So here we can create shaders, so we can create materials. And materials control how the geometry, the physical properties of the geometry. So how shiny that is, how transparent it is, can you see through it, and so on. Okay, so let's create a principled shader and select it and then double click on it. And I want to rename that shader to background. Okay, and then go back to material palette. And now I want to drag this shader into the background. So now I apply that shader to the background, and if I change the color, it's going to change the background color as well. So you can change it to whatever color you want. Okay, and now we're going to create another shader for the rig, for the character. So again, select it and rename it to rig shader. And I want to apply it to the character. And now be careful, because remember, we created two characters, two geometries. So for everything up to frame 61, we have one geometry showing up. And after 61, we have the second geometry. So we need to make sure that we apply this material to both of those, okay? So let's select geometry boxes, import fracture. Then let's go to render tab. And now you can see we have the material and we can link the material here. So instead of dragging and dropping it to the scene, you can also link it here. It's the same thing. Okay, so let's click on that. Go to material, rig shader, accept. And now make sure to do the same thing for the animation. So render, okay, you can see it's already linked here. But if you want to relink it, and click accept. Okay, so again, go back to material palette, select the shader, and our points, our boxes are red, but in the final scene, I don't want them to be red. So if you use point color, it means it's going to keep this red color. If you switch it off, even though you cannot see it in the scene, in the preview, you will see in the render that it got rid of the red and replaced it with whatever color we picked in here. Okay, so again, let's go back to this render view, Ctrl S to save, and click render. Okay, so you can see one more thing here, and that's the floor. It's different color. And we also have these pixels, which are the same color as the floors, the walls. And this is because in object level, we have the background and also the ground plane. So we're using the ground plane for the simulation and the background for rendering. So let's hide the ground plane. Let's go back to the scene view, okay? So that's with displayed ground plane, this is with hidden ground plane. So we want to hide the ground plane for our final render. And also here we can see that the shadows are quite sharp, and you can actually go to your light and go to the shadow option, and you can change the color of the shadows, you can change the intensity, so this is how transparent they are, or you can change it to depth map shadows. And this will give you some more options so you can play around with these if you want these shadows to be more blurred or less blurred and so on. But ray traced shadows will be a bit faster. So you can even change that color to purple or whatever you want. Okay, so let's just render another preview. Okay, so here you can see that the lights are a bit too bright, so we might need to adjust it, so maybe 3 and 2. So now it's just a matter of trial and error, trying to fix and tweak all these settings. Okay, so let's move on to rendering the final thing. So once you're happy with all the settings, you go to the out level. So we click on OBJ, click on out, and then here you should find your mantra node. So when you create the camera, mantra node also is created. And here first we need to pick our camera. So make sure it's camera 1 or whichever camera you want to use. Then we want to render frame range because we have 79 frames. So we have more than one frame to render. And you can see that if I change this to 79, it doesn't let me do that, okay? It goes back to 300. So I need to right click on where it says start end frame and click on delete channels. So now I can type my own values in here because that value previously was linked to this one over here. Okay, so I'm rendering 1 to 79, and I can also go to rendering options and change some settings. So if you want to have better quality, you need to increase pixel samples, and you can also increase some global quality as well. Okay, so in the images tab, you need to pick where you want to save your output picture. So you can see it's a string type of data, and now we can click on that option over here and save it. So let me create a new folder called render. And the naming convention is very important. So if you're saving more than one frame, make sure to use that naming convention. So name, whatever name you want to choose, then dot and $F, which means I'm rendering more than one frame, dot extension. So for example, PNG. And you click accept. Okay, and it's going to render it in the same format as we specified in the camera. So if you want to change the resolution, you want to change the size of your render, this is what you change in camera. So let me go to view and then resolution, and you can change the resolution to a different resolution in here. And this is what mantra node, so this node reads. So that's your final resolution. Okay, so once all the settings are set up, you can either render to disk, so it's not going to give you a preview, it's just going to render its separate image files to your drive, or you can render to mplay. So it opens a separate window and it shows you the render and the progression. The only downside is that you have to save all these files manually once the render is done. So let's say I rendered all frames and now I want to save them. So I need to right click on one of the images. You can preview your render in here by pressing play. So you can right click on the image or go to File and Save Sequence As. Okay, and then move your window because probably it's hidden somewhere. Okay, and now you just click here again. Pick where you want to save it, so in my render, And again, you need to use the same naming convention. So name.$f.png or another extension. Then you click accept and you click save, and it's going to save all these frames to your drive. Okay guys, that's the end of this tutorial. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you for staying until the end, and I hope it was helpful.